You know, there's something that happens to a lot of women, something that confuses them, frustrates them, and breaks them down quietly. They meet a man who doesn't care. He's emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, and cold. He's there one day and gone the next. He says just enough to keep her hoping, but never enough to make her feel secure. He acts like she's replaceable, like she means nothing, and yet she can't stop thinking about him. She keeps waiting for his message, keeps trying to prove she's different, keeps chasing someone who doesn't even seem to notice the chase. And the question is, why? Why do women keep chasing men who act like they're nothing? The answer isn't simple, but it's human. When someone doesn't give us what we want, the mind turns it into a challenge. We start to believe that if we can win them over, then we must be worthy. It becomes less about the person and more about what their validation represents. That validation becomes a symbol of self-worth. Deep down, she doesn't want him. She wants to feel chosen. And when he withholds affection, that unavailability becomes addictive. Because now, love feels like something she has to earn. It turns into a game where her entire sense of value depends on whether he responds, texts, compliments, or finally decides she's enough. But here's the truth: what's rare isn't always valuable. Sometimes what's distant isn't desirable, it's just damaged. We mistake mystery for depth, arrogance for confidence, detachment for strength, but the man who seems too good to care might not be powerful at all. He might just be emotionally numb. He might not be playing hard to get. He might be incapable of real intimacy. Yet that distance hooks us, because when love has been conditional in your past, you start believing that only the ones who make you suffer are worth fighting for. A lot of women grew up learning to work for affection, to prove they're lovable, to earn attention, to never be too much. So when they meet a man who's indifferent, that old wound reopens. Their subconscious whispers, maybe if I try harder this time, I'll finally be enough. It's not logic, it's trauma. It's not attraction, it's repetition, the same story written in a new body, and so she doesn't see the red flags. She sees a mission. She tells herself he's complicated, misunderstood, just scared of love. But really, she's scared too, scared to let go of something that feels familiar, even if it's painful. The chase gives her a sense of purpose. It distracts her from her own loneliness, and as long as she's chasing him, she doesn't have to face the deeper truth that she's been abandoning herself. Every time she excuses his silence, she betrays her needs. Every time she lowers her standards for crumbs, she confirms her fear that love is conditional. It's a cycle that feeds itself, because the more she chases, the less he values her. The less he values her, the harder she chases. It becomes a loop. Attention becomes the drug, rejection the withdrawal. But when a woman finally pauses long enough to see what's happening, something inside her shifts. She realizes she's not drawn to him because he's special. She's drawn to him because he reminds her of the part of herself she's still trying to heal. And the moment she understands that, the spell breaks. She stops chasing, not because she's angry, not because she's given up, but because she's awakened. Because she finally understands that love doesn't have to hurt, that attention shouldn't have to be earned. That if someone acts like she's nothing, it says everything about them and nothing about her. The real power isn't in getting him to care. The real power is in walking away and still caring for yourself. Let's talk about the psychology of chasing, because this is where the real truth hides. When you grow up not feeling fully seen, you start to confuse effort with love. You start to believe that to be loved, you have to perform. You have to prove you're worthy, earn attention, keep them interested. And this belief doesn't disappear when you become an adult. It follows you into every relationship, whispering in your ear that love is something you have to fight for. So, when a man becomes emotionally distant, when he doesn't text back, when he acts cold, that part of you that learned love must be earned wakes up. It says, I need to fix this. I need to make him want me. I need to prove I'm worth staying for. It's not about him, it's about the pattern. Because for many women, rejection doesn't just sting, it feels familiar. It reminds them of being unseen as a child, unheard as a teenager, unappreciated in past relationships. So, the moment a man pulls away, it doesn't just hurt their feelings, it touches their deepest wound. That wound says, I'm not enough, I have to try harder. And that's how chasing begins, not out of desire, but out of fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of not being chosen, fear that maybe, deep down, they are as unworthy as they've always been afraid to admit. But here's the paradox: the more you chase love, the more it runs. Genuine intimacy cannot exist where there is desperation. Because the moment you chase, you hand over your power. You turn love into a transaction, your effort in exchange for their validation. But love doesn't work that way. Real connection happens when both people stand still, when both meet halfway. When you start running, you stop being equal in the relationship. You become the one who waits, who worries, who analyzes every word, every text, every silence. You start to measure your value by how much of his attention you can hold, instead of how peaceful you feel in his presence. When you chase someone who keeps pulling away, what you're really doing is trying to rewrite your past. You're hoping that if this time you can make the distant person love you, you'll finally heal that old pain. But what you're actually doing is reliving it. You're not fixing the story, you're repeating it. Because the truth is, you can't heal your wounds through the same pattern that caused them. You can't earn from another person the love you've never given yourself. Every time you chase someone unavailable, you're teaching your heart that love is supposed to hurt, that it's supposed to be uncertain. And the more you believe that, the harder it becomes to recognize real love when it finally appears. The saddest part is that many women mistake chaos for chemistry. They think the anxiety they feel around him is passion, when really it's their nervous system reacting to inconsistency. That flutter in your stomach when he finally texts after ignoring you for days, that's not excitement. That's relief. That's your body calming down after stress. But because it feels powerful, we mistake it for love. We call it connection when it's really confusion. We chase that emotional high over and over, thinking that one day it'll lead to safety. But love built on anxiety will never feel peaceful. You don't have to chase what's meant for you. The one who truly wants you won't make you question your worth. They won't need to be convinced to care. They'll show up consistently, calmly, clearly. You won't have to decode their silence or interpret mixed signals. You'll just know, because real intimacy doesn't come from chasing. It comes from being honest, being open, being yourself. And when you learn to stop chasing, when you start giving that love back to yourself, something amazing happens. You stop being drawn to people who run. You stop finding excitement in uncertainty. You start craving peace, and peace starts finding you. Now here's where things get really interesting, because sometimes it's not the toxic man who confuses you, it's the healthy one. You finally meet someone who doesn't play games, who doesn't make you question your worth, who's kind and consistent, and you find yourself feeling nothing. You tell yourself he's nice, but maybe too nice. You say there's no spark, no thrill, no chemistry. You start to wonder if something's wrong with him, or worse, something's wrong with you. But what's really happening is this: your nervous system doesn't recognize peace. It's been trained to crave chaos. When you've spent years chasing emotionally unavailable people, when you've lived off adrenaline, anxiety, and uncertainty, calmness feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. You're used to the emotional roller coaster. You're used to the highs and lows, the tension, the waiting, the confusion. You mistake emotional safety for boredom because you've been conditioned to believe love has to feel dramatic to be real. The quiet, steady love of a healthy person doesn't activate that anxious part of your brain, and so it feels less exciting. But that excitement you miss isn't love, it's survival. It's your body reacting to unpredictability. Let me explain this clearly. When someone triggers your anxiety, your brain releases dopamine every time they finally give you attention. That dopamine rush feels like pleasure, but it's tied to pain. It's like emotional gambling. You never know when the next hit of affection is coming, so you keep playing. The distance, the inconsistency, the guessing, it all keeps your brain hooked. And then when a healthy man comes along, someone who's consistent, someone who texts back, who shows up, you don't get that same chemical hit. It feels flat even though it's safe. That's not because you're broken. It's because your nervous system is addicted to intensity. And this is why so many women say they want a good man, but keep choosing the wrong ones. It's not that they don't see the red flags, it's that the red flags feel familiar. The inconsistency feels like home. The calm man doesn't challenge their trauma, he challenges their pattern. And breaking that pattern requires self-awareness. It means being able to say, just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's love. Just because someone feels exciting doesn't mean they're right for me. That realization takes strength because peace doesn't give you the rush. Peace doesn't feed your ego. Peace doesn't make you chase. Peace makes you heal. But healing isn't comfortable at first. It's quiet. It's steady, it's stable, and for someone used to proving their worth, that stability can feel almost unbearable. They'll say things like, I just don't feel the spark, but the spark they're chasing is really anxiety in disguise. It's the body mistaking tension for passion. Because real love isn't fire that burns you, it's warmth that stays. It's the kind of connection where you don't need to question, you don't need to earn, you don't need to perform. When you start to heal, you start to see how your past shaped your attraction. You realize that what you used to call chemistry was often just chaos. And what you once dismissed as boring was actually peace. The more you grow, the more you crave calmness, because calm doesn't mean lack of excitement. It means lack of fear. And when fear is gone, love finally feels like love. So, yes, sometimes confidence looks like distance. But not the cold, dismissive kind, the grounded kind, the kind that says, I don't need to chase or prove myself. I know my worth. That's real strength. That's what healthy men carry, not arrogance, but emotional balance. They don't play games because they're not seeking control. They're seeking connection. And if you've spent your life chasing what hurts, that kind of man might not trigger your desire right away. But once your heart learns what peace feels like, you'll realize that's the kind of love that lasts. That's the kind of love that doesn't drain you, doesn't confuse you, doesn't make you doubt yourself. It just feels safe, soft, and real. And that's when you finally understand the right man won't make you chase him, he'll meet you where you are. So, how do you stop chasing men who act like you're nothing? How do you end a pattern that feels so familiar, so automatic, that it almost feels like part of who you are? The truth is, you don't stop by force. You stop by healing. You stop by understanding that chasing is not about love, it's about fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of feeling like you'll never be enough unless someone else confirms it for you. When you realize that every time you chase, you're really trying to fill a hole that someone else created in you long ago, that's when change begins. Because healing starts the moment you stop blaming them and start understanding yourself. You don't stop chasing by suddenly becoming strong or cold. You stop by becoming aware. You start noticing the moments when you feel anxious, when you're waiting for the phone to buzz, when you catch yourself checking if they've seen your message. Those moments are your mirror. They're showing you what part of you is still seeking validation. They're not weakness, they're information. When you feel that pull to chase, it's not about the man at all. It's about the version of you who still believes love is something you must earn. And when you see that clearly, you can finally make a different choice. The truth is, you don't chase what you trust. You don't chase what you believe will stay. You only chase what you fear will leave. So, the work isn't about getting better at playing hard to get. It's about learning to feel safe in your own presence. It's about creating stability within yourself so that someone else's inconsistency doesn't shake your entire world. When you become emotionally grounded, when you build a life filled with purpose, self-respect, and inner peace, you stop craving the attention that once made you feel alive. You stop confusing chaos with connection. You begin to recognize that calm isn't boring, it's freedom. When you start choosing yourself, everything changes. You stop apologizing for your standards. You stop begging for clarity. You stop tolerating half effort disguised as potential. You begin to understand that your energy is sacred. You start protecting it the way you should have all along. You no longer chase people who make you question your worth because you've finally learned to see your worth without their approval. And that shift, that deep internal knowing, is where your power lies. Because when you truly know your value, indifference no longer feels attractive. It feels empty, it feels beneath you, and this is the beautiful part. When you stop chasing, the right people start finding you. Not because of magic, but because your energy changes, you're no longer desperate, you're no longer performing. You're authentic, you're grounded. You become the kind of person who attracts healthy love because you've created it within yourself first. And when someone tries to play games, you don't get hooked, you get bored. When someone withholds attention, you don't panic, you pull back. Because you've learned that real love doesn't require you to lose yourself to keep it. You start seeing love differently. You stop saying, I want someone to choose me, and start saying, I choose peace. You stop saying, I want someone to love me, and start saying, I already love me, anyone else is just a bonus. That's not arrogance, that's emotional maturity. It's the understanding that love should add to your life, not become your life. It should feel like coming home, not like fighting for entry. When you stop chasing, you give space for something deeper: mutual respect, emotional safety, partnership. You learn to receive instead of constantly proving. You learn to communicate instead of perform. You learn that walking away isn't giving up, it's leveling up. Because when you finally value yourself enough to say, I deserve better, you're no longer operating from fear. You're operating from faith, faith in yourself, faith in your worth, faith that real love doesn't need to be chased. And that's the moment everything changes. When you stop trying to be chosen, you become the chooser. When you stop chasing, you start attracting. Because you're no longer running after what doesn't want to stay, you're walking in alignment with what's meant for you. And that right there is when you realize that peace is not found in the arms of someone who plays hard to get. Peace is found in the heart of someone who finally stopped running after the wrong ones and decided to come home to herself. Let's talk about intimacy, real intimacy, because somewhere along the way, we've confused it with performance, pressure, and expectation. We've turned it into something you do to get validation, instead of something you create to build connection. Most people don't realize this, but intimacy is not physical first. It's emotional, it's psychological. It's about feeling safe enough to be seen. You can't rush that, you can't demand it, and you can't manipulate it. It's not about how much you touch someone's body. It's about how deeply you can touch their soul. When you ask someone for intimacy and you carry expectation or entitlement in your energy, you're not asking, you're taking. You're creating pressure, not connection, and pressure kills intimacy faster than rejection ever could, because no one, man or woman, can open up where they don't feel safe. Safety is the foundation of closeness. And that kind of safety doesn't come from seduction. It comes from sincerity. It comes from presence. It comes from knowing how to sit with someone without trying to prove, persuade, or perform. See, real intimacy happens when both people can be vulnerable without fear. When they don't need to wear masks, when they can say, "This is me, the good, the bad, the imperfect," and still be accepted, that's where connection grows. But when intimacy becomes a test of worth, when one person feels like they have to earn it or say yes out of guilt, that's not connection, that's coercion disguised as affection. And we need to stop romanticizing that, because true closeness never comes from convincing someone to give in. It comes from inspiring someone to open up. The problem is, many people don't know how to ask for intimacy without pressure because they were never taught emotional patience. We live in a world that confuses speed with depth. Everything has to happen now: the date, the kiss, the connection, the confession. But love that's rushed rarely lasts. It fades as fast as it flares up. The kind of intimacy that actually changes you, that makes you feel seen, valued, and alive, takes time. It takes communication, emotional awareness, and honesty. You have to be willing to say, "I'm here, I care, and I'm not in a hurry." You have to make the other person feel that they are free to say yes, free to say no, free to just asterisk be asterisk. Because intimacy born from freedom is the only intimacy that feels real. When you stop chasing instant gratification, you create space for genuine connection. You stop trying to get something from the other person and start trying to asterisk, understand, asterisk them. You start listening more than performing. You start noticing their comfort, their energy, their silence. You realize that closeness doesn't come from convincing someone to open up. It comes from being so emotionally grounded that they feel safe doing it naturally. And that's where respect enters, because respect is the language of love that lasts. Without respect, even the strongest attraction fades. But when you respect someone's boundaries, when you honor their pace, you show that your desire isn't selfish, it's sacred. Intimacy without pressure is about mutual willingness. It's about creating a space where both hearts can breathe. It's about allowing things to unfold without control. When you move from your heart instead of your ego, the energy changes. You no longer ask to asterisk take asterisk. You ask to asterisk share asterisk. You no longer seek to prove anything. You simply offer presence. You no longer think, how can I get closer? But instead, how can I make them feel safe enough to let me in? And when that happens, the connection becomes effortless. It stops being a game and becomes something real. Because when two people meet in that space with honesty, respect, and patience, intimacy becomes a reflection of trust, not transaction. And that's when it stops feeling like pursuit and starts feeling like partnership. It's no longer about possession, it's about presence. It's no longer about winning, it's about understanding. And that's the most beautiful kind of closeness, the one that doesn't need pressure, performance, or power, just two hearts choosing to meet each other freely, fully, and fearlessly. Here's the truth about power. It's not about who cares less, who texts last, or who walks away first. Real power isn't in control, it's in clarity. It's in knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you forget it. So many people think emotional distance equals strength. They play games, act uninterested, withhold affection, all to appear powerful. But that's not power, that's fear dressed up as control. Real power is quiet. It doesn't need to prove, it doesn't chase, but it also doesn't run. It just stands firm, grounded in self-respect. When someone acts like you're nothing, the natural instinct is to try and prove your worth. You want to show them what they're missing, to make them see your value. But that reaction comes from insecurity, not empowerment. The truth is, you never have to prove your worth to someone who can't see it. Because no amount of convincing can change what a blind heart refuses to recognize. The moment you start explaining your value, you've already handed over your power. The moment you start chasing someone's acknowledgement, you've already forgotten your own. Power is not in making them stay.